Woo!
Welcome to another episode of Market Her. I'm Bree Ringhell.
I'm Britt Schwartz.
And I am Angela Martinez. Guys, we have a special guest today.
Yay.
We're so excited. Kim Scott from Radical Candor is joining us today. We couldn't be more thrilled to have you here. As we mentioned before, we just did a quick introduction before we started recording. Pretty sure we're fangirling right now. So if we get a little overexcited with your presence, please forgive us.
I'm honored. Thank you.
Well, we've been reading your book. It is our book club, our first book club book. I also, like I mentioned to you before, I drove up to Connecticut this week and back from Connecticut Monday and Wednesday. And I was totally engrossed with your podcast. I mean, from start to finish, each and every episode was so incredibly valuable. I wish I could have pulled over and jotted down notes. But I immediately, even on Monday or Sunday night, I drove up Sunday night. Monday, first thing, I started using some of your tips immediately. I really put a lot of things into action. We just had a new team member join. So I did the whole storytelling, start from kindergarten and tell me your story. Which she was like, really? I'll start in college. I'm like, start in kindergarten. I want to hear it all. But it was so valuable. And you were right. When you start telling that story, you pick out these little things that they go through in high school and, elementary that you realize their passion, and you can kind of, build on that. So Kim, why don't you introduce yourself to our audience?
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled that your team has more diversity. I'm a big believer in diversity. So that's great. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So I wrote this book, Radical Candor, and I wrote the book because I was coaching a number of CEOs, and I realized that the core building blocks of management are really the same, whether or not you're CEO of a huge company or a brand new manager. The challenges of building a relationship with your teammates, of setting hierarchy to the side so that you can build a relationship, of offering feedback, and more importantly, soliciting feedback from people, of building a team, making a team cohesive, helping people take a step in the direction of their dreams, and of course, let's not forget achieving the results you're trying to achieve with a group of people. Those are the same. Those challenges are the same. The fundamental human drama is the same. And coaching doesn't really scale. I can only coach a few people. And I wanted to share this advice much, much more broadly. And so that's really why I wrote the book. You want me to give you kind of the core idea of the book?
Yeah,
The core idea of the book is that at the heart of being a good leader is the ability to do two things at the same time: to care personally and challenge directly. And when you can show that you care personally at the same time that you challenge people directly, I call that radical candor. And that pertains to not just criticism, but also praise. In fact, a big part of your job as a leader is to show what success looks like. Positive target identification. So both praise and criticism can be radically candid. And together I call that guidance, providing guidance to your team. Yeah. Now, there are three different ways in which guidance goes wrong. One is when you do challenge, but you forget to show that you care, or maybe you really don't care. And that I call obnoxious aggression. That at first I called that just the asshole quadrant. and I stopped doing it for a very important reason, because we all make all these mistakes all the time. So the way to use the radical candor framework is not to use these terms as labels for people. Don't start writing names in boxes, but use it like a compass to help you guide conversations to a better place. So that's one bad direction you can take. And when you realize you're in obnoxious aggression, the thing to do is to focus on showing you care personally. But unfortunately, a lot of us often have the wrong instinct. When we realize we've been a jerk, we go the wrong direction. And instead of showing we care personally, we just back off our challenge. Right. And when you do that, you're all of a sudden neither caring nor challenging, and you've landed in the manipulative insincerity quadrant, the worst of all. And we all do this. This is the false apology. This is pretending we agree when we don't agree, just to sort of make peace. But we like to tell stories about obnoxious aggression and manipulative insincerity because there's a lot of drama there. But by far the most common mistake that most of us make all the time is when we do show that we care, and because we're reluctant to hurt somebody's feelings, we fail to challenge them directly. And that is what I call ruinous empathy. And so I think part of the reason why the book resonates for people is that so many people do make this mistake of ruinous empathy, and now they have a name for it. But the way the book gets misused, the way the term radical candor gets misused in a way that hurts me to my core, is that people say, in the spirit of radical candor, and then they proceed to act like a garden variety jerk. And that is not radical candor, that's obnoxious aggression. So that's the book in a nutshell.
And it's trying to hide behind the book's meaning and taking it to a different extreme.
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you say about people have a wording for those terms now. Like I just wrote a review of your book for our company blog, and I'm totally in that. Yeah, I wanted people to know about it, not just the summary, but some of the things that really stood out to me. And being a ruinous empathizer is something that I'm still working on. And I had a one-on-one with my supervisor where I was telling him about something and I caught myself. I'm like, oh my gosh, you know what? I'm just being a ruinous empathizer right now. Like I'm creating my own problems. So I have a word for it. So it's great.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes a shared vocabulary is really helpful to just move through mistakes that we all make.
I love the what you wanted to call the book. Can you share that with everybody else and how it got to be called Radical Candor? Because I think that's pretty interesting.
So when I was first talking about the idea of radical candor, I was calling radical candor just tough love. And I knew that was not quite right, but I didn't have really a better idea. And so I'd given this talk at a Qualtrics conference, and I was in the elevator with Dan Pink, who had given a talk just after me. And he was saying, I love this idea. And I said, but the language is not quite right. And somewhere between the first floor and the 14th floor of the hotel, Dan came up with radical candor.
Wow.
So I'm very grateful to him. It was the book, as I was writing it, at one point had 150 collaborators or something. It was so big that it was starting to break Google Documents. I called I called them and they were like, wow, this is one of the biggest documents with the most collaborators. So it was great. They helped me make it perform better, and I got so much good advice from so many people. It was very meta. I got a lot of radical candor on radical candor.
Oh yeah.
I think what stands out to me, two things, is one, how important the words that we choose are, right? Tough love and radical candor in the same bucket, but until you really get to that place where you articulate exactly what you're describing. And to be able to, as a newer manager myself, the thing I love most about what you said is that regardless if this is your 30th year of experience or you're a brand new manager, it can be very easy when you're coming into this to say, well, I'm only experiencing this because I don't have experience, or I'm experiencing this because of this. But to recognize that it's a global, like everybody feels the same way, takes away the isolation of it's not just me. Right. Now I can let go of that and really grasp these concepts and apply them in my life. So I love that piece.
It's hard. Thank you so much, because it is so hard, and it's hard for everybody. It's hard for people, even people who have tons and tons of experience. The struggle is largely similar.
The struggle is real.
The struggle is real. And you know, this is a practice that this is something you manage. It's not something you fix. It's like doing the dishes or exercising or something. You have to keep doing it. Yep. And you can, as it becomes sort of habitual, it becomes a little bit easier, but you can never stop doing it.
Yeah.
It's a muscle. It sounds like a muscle that you have to exercise and use and keep growing.
Yes,
Yeah.
there's a dental analogy that I like. So radical candor, if you put it into practice and it becomes a habit, is like brushing and flossing. You start to feel gross if you don't do it, right? But it is, if you fail to do it for a while or even a long time, you kind of build up what I call feedback debt. And what happens is then you have to go get a root canal, and it is very painful. So it's much better to do that routine maintenance. A lot of these conversations are just 2-minute conversations that you have in between meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard. It's hard to be present enough to have those 2-minute conversations, and you're busy. You're probably late for your next meeting. You probably have to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
And so just building the discipline of having these quick conversations, both praise and criticism, is important.
Well, Kim, it sounds like you have some experience walking in our shoes, needing to go to the bathroom, hungry, late for a meeting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right before this, we were all like eating toast and yogurt really quick because we haven't had time to eat.
Yes. I know. I feel your pain. That is what time management is so important to being a manager, and saying no to things so that you have time to do the things that matter most is hard, but vital.
Yeah. I have a question for you. And this wasn't necessarily my original question, but it's kind of going in that direction. In terms of, being an implementer and a manager, because this is, some things that we experience, because as a principal strategist here at the company, myself and Britt, we handle the strategy of our clients, but we also handle the management of our team.
Right.
How would you give any feedback or advice in terms of how to split those evenly down the middle, or should they even be split down the middle?
Yeah, there's not one answer. There's never a formula for this stuff. But one way to think about it is you want to make sure that you are working through your team, that you're not grabbing too many decisions. And so you want to make sure that you are prioritizing management, that you're remembering that the working with your team, the management part of your job, is actually your job. I remember one of the most vivid experiences of my career is I was at a startup and I had to make a pricing decision. And I had come in early to make this pricing decision because my day, as we just discussed, was plugged up. And as I walked in, one of the people who worked for me had just found out he was having a major medical situation, and he was completely freaked out. And so I spent sort of 45 minutes having a cup of tea with him and talking through it. And then as he left, I walked toward my desk, and I passed by another person on the team whose son was in the intensive care unit. And I knew I couldn't just say, "How's it going?" So I spent a little time talking with him, encouraging him to leave. Even if he didn't need to be at the hospital, he could go to the gym or have a swim, or just he needed to take care of himself.
Right.
And then so I'm now almost at my desk to make this pricing decision, and another guy stops me, and his kid has won this major math award in New York State, and it's like the best math fifth grader in the state. And so now all of a sudden I'm having to go from sort of intense sympathy to intense celebration. By the time I got to my desk, I was just wrung out.
Yeah.
And I had no more energy left to think about the pricing decision. And so I just called this coach. I had a coach. And I said, "Am I really just a shrink? Am I just a babysitter here?" And she starts yelling at me. She says, "This is called management, and it is your job And I realized that she was so right. Very often we treat these moments in the day, the emotional labor of the job, as something that is like extracurricular, and it's not. It's actually core to your job. And so you've got to make sure that you take care of yourself, that you have the stamina, that you're not going to get burned out by all of these things. And so it's so important to take care of yourself and to put these things front and center, to make them actually part of your job. Now, that's not to say that you get to never do any hands-on work.
Right.
Because if you're not doing some of the hands-on work, then you can't guide your team either. You're not close enough to what they're doing to distinguish between the good ideas and the bad ideas, and to give advice when it's asked for. So that's why it's so important to be so ruthless with your time. You want to make sure that you're taking the time to listen, to help people clarify their ideas. This is what I call the get shit done wheel. So you're listening, you're clarifying the ideas, then you're creating a culture of debate where ideas get debated on the team. But you want to take the time to nurture ideas before you submit them to the rough and tumble of debate. Then you want to push decisions into the facts. So you want to make sure that a decision gets made, but your job as the leader is not to grab the decisions, but just to identify who the decision maker is and by when the decision will get made. And then now it's tempting to feel like you're done. A decision has been reached, so it's going to happen, right? No. Now you've got to persuade the rest of the team that this is the right decision, or you've got to give the decider the stage to persuade the rest of the team. But you got to make sure that everybody who's going to implement that decision has been brought along and is on board with it. And then now it's time to execute. And so all of those other things take up time. So you want to make sure that you're going through those steps, but not getting stuck at any one. You want to make sure that everybody is paying the collaboration tax, but that the tax isn't so high that nobody has time, including you, to execute. So that's why you need to be ruthless about killing meetings, about making sure that you have time to get your hands dirty, to do work along side by side with your team. And then of course you've got to learn whether or not that decision was the right decision or the execution was good enough. And then you got to start the whole process over again. That's why I call it the get stuff done wheel. And it's hard. So I think the best thing you can do is be conscious of what the steps are and make sure that you're going through each of those steps and giving them each their due, but not getting stuck at any one of those steps. Does that make sense?
Yes, I love that feedback.
It sounds like managers, a large part of our responsibility is creating the space, both mentally and emotionally, to handle those ups and downs as needed for the team, and balancing that against the get shit done wheel. And I would imagine that for every team, every individual that's composed of that, it might look different for me versus what it does for Angela, based up on myself and the makeup of our team and the things we're trying to achieve. Does that sound about right?
That sounds exactly right. If I could give you formulas, I would, but I can't. Every situation is different. And not only is it different, one situation is different from another, but every situation is dynamic. So what you need to do this week is going to look very different than what you need to do next week. I mean, so it's tricky. You just got to remain flexible.
Even Bree has a very difficult situation too, because she's the leader of us. So it's myself and Britt and another member who's leading a team of pods, which is about 6 or 7 people. But then Bree is the manager of all of us.
Yeah, that's actually, so in my book review, I talked about the get stuff done wheel, because I learned that the hard way. I felt like I had to be the decision maker because it's my job. I have to do it. And then we did not do the persuade step at all. So just things that I like reflecting back, things that didn't go so well. I'm like, okay, if I'd followed that process, it would have been much better. And we actually are going through a lot of changes organizationally right now, where I'm definitely like, I even like brought your book out and like turned the page. I'm like, I'm trying to do this wheel, guys. Like, this is what I want to do. But
that's great. And don't feel bad that you thought that your job was to make the decision. It's like one of the most common even President Bush thought, I am the decider, you know, and the reason why that was so funny is that he wasn't actually the decider. But, you know, he got to a certain level of success in life before he learned he wasn't the decider. So it is really, it's one of the hardest management lessons to learn.
Yeah, like one of the things that I struggle with, I guess a question I've got for you is with the members of Angela and Britt's team. Like, I'm not their direct manager. I don't have one-on-ones with them, but there are times where I do need to have some pretty direct conversations. And I feel like I'm falling on the care personally spectrum. So, like, do you have any advice of how I could either build better relationships with people, but it's also like not super scalable? Like, how do you have the time to do that? It's something I definitely struggle with. And I hate for people to feel like I'm an obnoxious aggressor because we don't have that relationship, but sometimes we still need to have those conversations.
Yeah, it is. So relationships don't scale. Plutarch wrote this beautiful essay about how you can't have more than 3 friends. And that was true, you know, when Plutarch was writing, it's still true today. I think you can have more than 3 direct reports, but I don't think you can have more than 10. So, because it does take time, these things do take time. So there's a couple of things you can do to begin to scale your relationship with a broader organization. The most important thing you do is actually form good relationships with your direct report, because each of your direct reports, because the relationships that you have then impact and influence the relationships that they have. And it's from that culture emerges, and culture does scale. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really good in organizations is to make sure that you're coming up with what I call a speak truth to power process. So when you're a manager of managers, one of the things that I recommend is that you do the following, that you create the following speak truth to power process. Sometimes this is called skip level meetings, but that sounds very hierarchical. So I like speak truth to power. But anyway, the idea is that you go to the reports of your direct report. So let's say I have a team of 5 people, and one person on my team is Sally. So I go to Sally's reports without Sally in the room. And by the way, I've explained this process to everyone beforehand, and so it's clear that this is just a routine thing I do. I'm not singling out Sally because I suspect her team hates her or something like that. And now that I've explained this to my direct reports, Sally has gone to her team and explained the process. So Kim is going to help me be a better leader by coming and asking you all what I could do or stop doing to be a better boss. And so I sit down with the team, and usually it's very awkward. The first meeting is, everybody's like, whoa, what's happening here? and so I'll say, I'm just going to go around person by person. What does Sally do that you all love? What do you want her to keep doing? And so that kind of opens things up. Praise, you want to usually, not in a feedback sandwich kind of way, but you want to focus on the good stuff. And then I'll say, what could Sally stop doing or start doing that would make it easier to work with her? And so then we'll go around person by person, and one of 2 things will happen. You'll either get crickets or you'll get a gripe session. So if you get a gripe session, the thing to do is to sort of make a joke. Say, look, the purpose of this is to help Sally get better. And one of the services I do not have to offer is a personality transplant. So let's focus on what are the things Sally can do. You want to sort of push Sally's employees to think like managers, to give really actionable feedback to Sally. And then you want to prioritize the issues. So, okay, we've come up with 35 things, Sally, but Sally can't do 35 things. If you all want to choose 2 or 3, let's figure out what the most important ones are. And the whole time I'm taking notes and projecting them so that everybody understands this is a not for attribution meeting. I'm not going to say who said what, but I am going to tell Sally what we talked about, because otherwise we're all just wasting our breath if it doesn't get, it doesn't get back to Sally. And then I'll say towards the end of the meeting, I'll say, do you all feel you could tell Sally these things directly? And usually the answer is no at first. And so what could Sally do to help you all tell her directly so it doesn't have to go through me?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really important, because otherwise I'm sort of encouraging people to always come to me and not go directly to Sally, and that doesn't scale.
Right.
So about 5 minutes before the meeting's over, I'll say, okay, now what I want you to do is to realize that I'm going to send this to Sally in 5 minutes. So everybody look at the notes and make sure you're good with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a tendency of focusing the last 5 minutes of the meeting. And then I'll send the notes to Sally at the end of the meeting. And in my next one-on-one with Sally, I'll say, okay, Sally, what are you going to do? You got a lot of feedback. What actions? How are you going to make listening tangible? And so Sally will then spend some time coming up with a plan, and then she'll go talk to the team about it. And I'll work with her to make sure that she takes the feedback well, that she reacts positively, that she makes listening tangible, that she rewards the candor. And I'll check in with the team in a couple of weeks and say, are you satisfied? Do you see any positive change? And if the answer is that they're basically satisfied and there is positive change, then I don't have to have another skip level meeting for a year. If the answer is no, Sally didn't understand and didn't hear, and in fact we feel like she's punishing us, then I've got some more work to do.
Yeah.
But it is such an important thing to make sure in an organization that people do feel not just free, but that it is their job to speak truth to power.
Yeah.
Because it's hard and it's risky. And so when you're a manager of managers, you got to make sure that you're doing something proactive to pull this feedback up out of the organization. I'm sorry, I'm going to walk around because I've got to go plug in for some reason. I'm running out of battery. So
I love that advice. Like I've been wrestling with that. Do I do certain one-on-ones and try to get that information? But I love the idea of making it a process so it's not awkward or as awkward for everybody.
It'll be awkward. I'm not going to promise you it won't be awkward. It'll be totally awkward, but it is achievable. It is absolutely achievable, doable, and vital to do. There's a really interesting case study where Johnson & Johnson had a credo, and they changed the credo. So the old credo said that there must be a process for employees to submit complaints and concerns. And the new credo read, employees should feel free. Lots of luck with that. They didn't feel free, and in fact, for a while I wouldn't feed my kids Tylenol when they got sick because there was so much junk in the kids' Tylenol. So you've got to make sure that you're taking steps to pull the best ideas, out of your people, and that they do feel not just free, but that it's their obligation to criticize their bosses.
And as a Sally in that situation, I mean, first of all, I can't pretend that I think it'd be awesome to hear feedback on the ways that you're not, really shining. But on the other hand, at least knowing that is so valuable to me. And on the other side of Sally, as one of those employees, to be able to have a place that it's encouraged to give that feedback, I think I see how it's beneficial from every standpoint of reviewing that.
Yeah. So thank you for that. I am a big believer in the skip level meetings. It's hard. You're going to hear things as manager that are hard to hear, but it's better than not hearing them. Yeah. And it is also empowering for everybody to know that they don't have to suffer in silence.
Yeah. And I think
love that. I can't wait to get that on me from you guys.
I know that's where I was focusing. I was more focusing on I'm really interested, and Bria, I already know you're going to do this because I can tell how excited you are. I want the feedback from my team more than I'm interested in giving feedback quite yet. Like I really want to hear where things settle in the really good and the really ugly at times, and just fixing that.
You know what? We just actually had a conversation this morning in our retro meeting in regards to this very thing. Like, how do they feel? How can they get more connected with Bree, and like what Bree's role is in terms of, you know, their connection, and what's going to happen with a CSM, like client success manager? Is that going to kind of take on more of your stuff, Bree? So I think this is so perfect to also feel like my team has a connection to you.
Yeah.
I absolutely love that.
But the important thing about skip level meetings is that don't allow them to proliferate. Like all meetings, don't allow them to proliferate. When I first started doing them, people loved them so much that I could have spent all day, every day doing nothing but skip level meetings.
Yeah.
For a 700 person team. So you got to make sure that it's part of a process and that you give some time to it, but not too much time. Because the truth is that when you're the leader of a big organization, like when I was at Google, I was leading a 700 person team. Not only could I not sort of truly care personally about all 700 people, I would have if I could have, but I couldn't even remember everybody's name.
Right.
And you've got to give yourself permission to realize that you're a human being, and human beings don't scale. And so you've got to figure out how to build an organization where the right things happen without you. They're not dependent on you as a human being.
Yeah. I'm going on my cruise next week. I'm like, you guys are going to be fine without me. Like, I don't have to be the decision maker. So your book has been really helpful in trying to figure out a system for that so that people feel connected, but my calendar is not even crazier than it already is. So
yeah. No, the best thing I did for my team was go on a good long maternity leave.
Yeah. Then I just have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, one of the questions I had was, what are you reading? If we were to be looking for our next book for the book club, what would you suggest?
Oh, you want management books so here's a true confession. I usually read novels. I almost never read management books.
What kind of novels? I love to read.
George Eliot is my favorite. I mean, I reread the classics. I reread Anna Karenina, I reread Moby Dick every couple of years. So I reread a lot of the classics often. But there are some great management books out there. And so I love Dan Pink's books. I think they're all great. I especially love Drive, but all his books are fantastic. I really love Adam Grant's books. All of them are just superb. Cheryl's book, Lean In, is obviously a great one. And Option B is also, it's not really a management book, but it's a fantastic, it's a great read. There's some really, I think Andy Grove's books are great. High Output Management, but also One-on-One with Andy Grove. He was a deep thinker about management. And then I think it's also interesting, Csikszentmihalyi wrote this book called Flow, which I really like a lot. I think it's a great book. Sometimes reading books on psychology are very interesting for management.
Yeah.
A great direction. I can't wait. We have a lot of great recommendations. We'll have to dig through them and figure out what's next.
No, it's going to be
making me want to get Daniel Pink on an episode, because we're a big fan of Drive.
Oh yeah, I was going to say, I was looking back here.
There it is.
Awesome. Well, Kim, thank you so much to be so willing to jump on and spend an hour with us to talk through this concept. And thank you for the concept and all of the great insight that I know the three of us are going to implement in the next hour. And I'm so excited to have been able to dive into your mind a little bit, for everyone listening to learn a little bit more how to be radically candid.
Well, thank you so much. And I hope you'll tell me which of the ideas work for you and which don't. My focus right now is on how we can roll out radical candor and what makes it scale at organizations, and and which ideas that I suggest work for you and which don't would be really helpful.
That's great, Kim, because we considered, since you said yes being on Market Her, that we're basically friends now. So we'll be emailing you with working.
Excellent.
Don't worry about that.
Excellent. I'm thrilled. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for being on with us.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. And your podcast, you guys, if you haven't listened to her podcast yet, highly, highly recommend it. It kind of starts off with the book in the beginning of the book, and it kind of goes throughout the chapters. And I had a great time listening to it. I think Russ is fabulous as well.
Yes, Russ is wonderful. He's one of the great leaders of all time.
He is. And I love your relationship with him on the show. I think it's awesome. So,
oh, good. Yeah, no, we had a lot of fun putting it together. We're not doing it anymore, but we're gonna restart the Radical Candor podcast.
Okay, great. I mean, if you guys need guest hosts, we'll be happy to come on.
That'd be great. I'd love it. Well, consider it done.
Perfect.
For you guys listening, find us on Facebook at Market Her, Impact Market Her Facebook group. You can find us on Instagram, where we share pictures of our kids, food, and really anything that's happening in real life. Yes. And we want to hear what you thought about this. What are questions that you have for Kim that we can send to her, because we're friends now, and we'll help you get answers to it. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
We listened.
Thank you. You heard.
Now go Market Her.